Welcome to The Courage Effect. I'm Suzanne Weller, and this is a show about growth and unleashing what's possible. You will hear inspiring stories about what courage looks like, how we navigate what's getting in our way, and the opportunities that surface when we choose courage over comfort. Let's get started. Hey, everybody, it's Suzanne. Welcome to The Courage Effect. I love all things gastronomic. I am a cook. I love food. I love beverages. I particularly love fermented beverages, and I particularly love wine and beer. And I am very fortunate because I live in Seattle, which is pretty much a craft beer mecca. And one of my husband Tom and our favorite breweries is Stoup Brewing in Ballard. We've been going to their tap room for about the past 10 years. They just celebrated their 10-year anniversary. And we love their beers. He's part of their beer club, and we even have the dog toy for our dog Bacon of the Stoup beer can, which I'll post an image to on the website so that you can all see it. And I'm thrilled to not just support a business whose products that I love, but a small owned business that is doing amazing stuff and creating really wonderful communities and spaces around their beer. So I'm thrilled today to have our guest, who is one of the co-owners of Stoup Brewing, who is Lara Zahaba. Lara is responsible for all things aesthetic, from the design of the tap room and the beer garden to space and merchandise. Formerly a veteran of the wine industry, Lara has 20 years of experience in marketing, PR, and education. And as a big fan of small details, she revels in the creative ways to share all things Stoup. Lara is a dedicated ale girl, always migrating towards pints of pale, IPA, porter, and stout. And I have to say, your Mosaic Pale Ale is my all-time favorite beer, so I definitely fall into that camp. Lara, welcome to The Courage Effect.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here. And I have to say, I think one of the reasons I'm in this place in my life is that I too am a lover of all things gastronomic, not only beer, but all the beverages, fermented especially.
Yes, well, and there's so much goodness, and I feel so fortunate to live in Seattle, not just because of the beverages, but the food. I mean, we live in an amazing place.
We do, for sure.
We do. Well, I would love to have you talk a little bit about, I mean, this is the courage effect. So the courage that really took to start your business. I mean, as the co-owner of the brewery. So talk a little bit about taking the leap to start Stoup.
Okay. I'm going to back up a little bit in order to tell you a little bit about where we got to the precipice for that leap. One of my, so I am an English major, and I am an English major who spent a year abroad in Italy and came out of that experience with the desire to speak Italian and somehow get to Italy. And I really was motivated to figure out what possible career could satisfy that desire. And that's what led me to wine in the first place, and more specifically to Italian wine. So one of my first acts of courage was leaving a stable job in Seattle to pursue that desire. And that was in rebellion to my parents, who, of course, advised to stick to the safe route. And but Brad and I leapt over to the East Coast, and I worked for a national wine importer called Winebow and was able to actually live that dream. But at the same time, I ended up kicking Brad's home brewing out of our teeny tiny Hoboken apartment.
Mm.
And he ended up brewing at several New York area breweries. And at the time, we had no idea that that would be so integral to decisions that we would make later on. Because we eventually ended up returning to our home in Seattle, and he returned to his lab job, and I continued on my wine path for another wine importer that was based here locally. And we started our family. We had 2 boys. And when those 2 guys were really young and we were just living the daily grind, we realized that we were really unhappy, and just really dissatisfied with our day-to-day lives. And we both came to the conclusion together that we needed to make a pretty dramatic change. And we ultimately wanted to be doing something that we were both passionate about. And our entire dating life had been centered around craft beer, the enjoyment of craft beer, mostly because of Brad's earlier discovery of it than my own. But So it was in those early parenting years that we were like, all right, let's start a brewery. Let's take this big leap. And that was, I mean, that was an even larger act of faith or leap of courage, I guess, um, than the first one, because we had so much, more to lose as young homeowners and parents of young children, or
Sure.
actually, maybe I shouldn't say young homeowners because we weren't necessarily so young at the time, but we were parenting very young children.
Yeah.
Um, and the brewery was mostly financed through an SBA loan.
Mm.
And in order to secure that financing, we had to leverage our house, but the loan demanded even more guarantees. And Brad's parents ended up having to guarantee their home on Lake Coeur d'Alene, as well as their Centennial farmland in Iowa. And
Wow.
so it was pretty terrifying to us that our failure could really jeopardize everything that they had spent their entire lives building.
Yeah. It's a lot of risk.
There was a fair bit of risk. And it's interesting when I look back, I wasn't afraid of taking that risk at that time. I was, we were really struggling, and I just knew we had to shake it up and we needed a pretty dramatic change. And so I pushed hard for the leap. And I absolutely do not regret it. It was the right decision. But I do find it interesting that today, when we're presented with new opportunities surrounding the brewery, I'm not as bold in my willingness to take those risks, right? Because 10 years later, we actually do have so much more to lose. So it's kind of an interesting dynamic surrounding risk and comfort and strategies, I guess.
It's so interesting. And I think that's the larger trend of when we're younger, we tend to jump faster because we have less risk. We haven't built as much. So the stakes are higher when, I mean, even though you had really high stakes, I mean, that's a lot because it's not just your properties and it was about Brad and Brad's family too. But it must be interesting too as you scaled the business because you have three locations now. And I know last year you opened up Capitol Hill with
We did.
Optimism Brewing,
We did.
and the changes there. So what are the things that feel different for you now? I mean, is it just risk in general that as you think about it, anything in particular that bubbles up for you?
Oh, well, I suppose if we wanted to talk about all of the personal issues, we could talk about what becoming a mother does to your, biological makeup and how that enhances your fears of everything.
Yeah.
But in talking about Stoop, I just realized um, that I'm proud of everything Brad, Robyn, and I have built together,
Mhm.
and it would make me profoundly sad if we were to make a decision that harmed the business or that just made the business unsustainable going forward. And I would feel that would be a profound loss. And I honestly, I mean, I know I would persevere and all of that, but it's hard for me to imagine where I would land or what kind of work I would do,
Yeah.
um, aside from representing, something that is my own. It's
Yeah.
hard. I mean, being an employer is not easy. Um, but at the same time, I don't know, maybe I've forgotten how to be an employee. I don't know. But
But you have a lot of people. You have a lot of staff. And
we
I have
do.
to say, your staff is always the happiest people. They are so welcoming. I love your staff. I mean, like we have great conversations when I go. So you're doing something right.
Well, thank you. I mean, it is important to us to have a warm, welcoming space for sure. Um, Community oriented and yeah, we hire friendly people and we know friendly and beer lovers. They're educated. They can really share the story of the beer. And I'm often sitting at the bar and just hearing their engagement with the customers, and we're definitely proud of it. We always like to say that Stoop Crew is the best crew.
Yes, undoubtedly. So good. What's the biggest surprise for you about, just as you've gone through the past 10 years? I'm just curious, what are some of the things that you didn't expect?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, I mean, I obviously don't want to get mired down by the P word, but the pandemic was a huge surprise and it was extremely difficult, but in a very strange way, it was also extraordinarily motivating. I think as we were humming along, right, we were probably at about 7 years in or so, and we're humming along. And all of a sudden, we have this global situation, and within a day, we're like shut down.
Yeah.
And we had to really come together, jump, and figure out how to save the business. And I am always so proud when I reflect back on that because Brad, Robyn, and I are really great partners. We have uniquely complementary skill sets, and we just came together once again and got creative, and all went into action and figured out all of the possible solutions for that period of time. And it was a really great reminder to us of how well we work together when we're in that active phase.
Sounds like an amazing trio.
Yeah, it's been good.
Well, and how interesting too. I mean, talk a little bit about what you do. I mean, you obviously do the marketing and the merchandise and on all of that. How do you distribute the work even just between you, Brad, and Robyn?
Well, Brad is our head brewer, director of operations, and he's really the business manager. Robyn is also a brewer, and she is so great at systems. And as a former teacher, she is really good at people. And so she doesn't actively do our human resources, but she's a really great source for establishing our procedural our operations. And then I am really more on the creative side. So like you said, merch, our labels. I work with a really great woman-owned branding company in Seattle called Blind Tiger on our designs. I work with a really great man since day one on the design of our physical spaces. So I've met so much extraordinary talent in this whole process. And I don't know, I have a lot of support in executing the vision, but I would say everything that's outward facing pretty much comes from me. So
That's a, that's amazing. Well, and I love the designs. That's one of the other things that's always so good is because you have so many beers that are out on the shelf, and the labels are always they're always something really funky going on. So, and I love that, and I love so much nod to music and a lot of like punk music from the 80s, which I'm a fan of. So,
we give
yeah.
our
So
age away, I think, a little bit.
yeah, okay, age given away. But yeah, but it's always fun. And that's the thing. I think that you're creating a really fun brand. And we have to cut to a break, but I'd love to hear more about the dynamics maybe between you and Brad and Robyn and the different I'm sure there are some challenges there too because you're in business with your partner. So,
Definitely.
all right, great. Let's take a break. We'll be back in a minute. This is The Courage Effect. Stay tuned. Courage takes on many forms. I believe that one of the most courageous things that we can do is recognize when we need help and seek out support. Is something interfering with your happiness or keeping you from achieving your goals? If you're going through a hard time, possibly struggling with depression or anxiety, therapy can give you tools to approach your life in a very different way. That's why I'm excited to tell you about today's sponsor, BetterHelp. BetterHelp's mission is to make therapy more affordable and accessible. It's an online platform where you can be matched with a professional therapist in as little as a few days just by filling out a few questions. I know from personal experience that finding a therapist and the right fit can be really difficult. With BetterHelp, you can easily switch to a new therapist at no additional cost. For more information and to sign up to get matched with a therapist, go to BetterHelp, that's HELP.com/courage. Visiting this link both supports the show and gets you 10% off your first month of BetterHelp. So if you're struggling, consider online therapy with BetterHelp.
Easy on the ears, good for the soul. Alternative Talk 1150.
Welcome back to The Courage Effect. This is Suzanne, and my guest today is Lara Zahaba, who is one of the co-owners of Stoup Brewing. So, Lara, we've been talking about the challenges of starting a business overall and just the risk and the courage that it takes to do that. And this was something that you did with your husband, with Brad. So
Yes.
talk a little bit about that. I mean, also Robyn. I don't want to forget Robyn, but I'm curious about the dynamics that you have. I mean, you talk about the strengths of having three owners. I'm sure there also might be some challenges with that, particularly with one being your partner. So give us a little bit of background on that.
Absolutely. I mean, there are definitely some challenges. I think the greatest challenge is that there's no separation really between our daily lives, right? We are living and working the brewery 100% of the time. So when Brad and I come home from work, we're not really able to share stories from a completely different venture. Sometimes it can be challenging, like to set boundaries, like, maybe we shouldn't be talking about this challenging brewery issue at 10 o'clock at night as we're getting ready for bed and causing, stressful sleep cycles. But I think the real reason it works for me and Brad is that, and for Robyn too, of course, is that the three of us really do have distinct lanes in the brewery. The fact that I am not getting in the way of whatever Brad wants to brew, and I am not in the brewery tinkering or making mistakes or whatever the case might be. And he is really not at all involved in, the next t-shirt that I want to make. He really doesn't want to be bothered with my design decisions, except when it comes to the bottom line. And so that keeps us independent enough for the collaboration to really work. But we always talk about, I don't know, the three of us do have a funny dynamic. I mean, even though I'm fully, I have the ability to make the design decisions and all of that, I always seek reinforcement, and I tend to seek not approval, but I want to know what other people like. But Brad, Robyn, and I specifically have this very funny dynamic where I often bring something to them, they make their choice, and then I go in a completely different direction. And they're always laughing. They're like, why are you even asking us? But for some reason, their opinions really clarify my own. And I'm not quite sure what that dynamic is about.
Well, it's nice that you have partners that you can do that with, and that you are also comfortable with still doing what you want to do, even though you have their feedback. I think that there's something to be said about having the courage to do that, to really go with your gut, but at the same time, you've cultivated that trust with both of them, obviously, to have that dynamic. So
yes, it definitely works. And of course, on the larger scale decisions, we're collaborating equally, and we actually have not had issues that we really don't come to agreement on. We really are able to find common ground in most of the bigger business decisions.
Yeah. And that's pretty remarkable, especially after going through the pandemic.
I think it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it is interesting. I would say that one of the other ways it can be challenging to work with your partner is that sometimes it's not my style. I mean, I tend to push when I see something that needs to be addressed. And of course, I push on Brad in ways that I wouldn't push on Robyn or any other colleague or employee. So that can be really great for certain aspects of the business, but of course that can present stress and challenges at home. So, it's a lively environment that we're living and working within.
It is a lively environment. And well, it's good that you're recognizing it and that you're talking about it, and you have to, because I think a lot of the time these dynamics happen and people are just like, yeah, we'll ignore it. But it sounds like you and Brad have a really strong relationship. And if anything, it's probably made your relationship all the stronger.
It has. I mean, I think Brad and I have been together for a really long time. It took us a really long time to actually get married and have the children and then start a business. So there's a lot of years of history there, and working together and understanding one another's personalities. And we see eye to eye on so many things, but we're pretty dramatically different. I mean, he's a chemist. He's a black and white thinker. And I am an English major, and I am not a black and white thinker. I'll torture anyone. I have a mug. I think Brad bought me the mug that just says, hang on while I overthink this. Or hang on a minute. Yeah.
That's really funny. Yeah, but it's really fun. So my dad's a chemist, and my sister and I were English majors.
So you know.
Yes, I know. My dad's also a really deep thinker, though. So I think, and it sounds like Brad probably is too. So you probably also bond on that, even though, yeah, overthinking.
He really is. He's funny. He is a deep thinker. He really understands. I've always been amazed. I'm just one of those people that can breeze through, and I could always do my homework fast. I could always nail the test. But sometimes I think back and think, did I absorb that material? And Brad really absorbs. And gosh, when we're having dinner table conversation and he can just, the histories, the politics or whatever he can recount, I think, where was I when we were learning this? Sometimes it's just different brain wiring for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I love that. Well, and I'm curious for you too, is that, it's so wonderful to see the success of the brewery and the fact that you have these new spaces and that you're growing. What's next for you? I mean, obviously, like you talk about, the more that you grow, it's great, but it's about sustaining it and figuring out how do you keep that success going? And there's obviously changes happening in the beverage industry. So what's on your radar right now?
Well, we are paying a lot of attention. We are just seeing a lot of competition, I think, in the craft beverage segment, not necessarily from other craft beer makers, but, ready to drink cocktails, um, the hard seltzers, all of these extra options combined with a real vibrant interest in in NA beverages right now do present us with challenges for staying relevant and um, being both a place and a beverage that the consumer wants to reach for. So we definitely, I mean, we will always continue to make the best beer we possibly can make. And we don't want to jump on trends, obviously. We want to stay true to ourselves, but we also don't want to ignore important signs from the consumer. Um, so yeah, we just continue to grow. We have recently started adding like for this winter where we have a warm cider available in the tap rooms. And the tap room laws in Washington do allow us to serve wine as long as it's local Washington made wine. So we have just recently started to offer, wine for those that might be coming along with their beer loving friends and prefer a different option.
Yeah, I remember seeing slushies there last summer, some wine slushies.
We had to really, really work on Brad for that one. he was he was not a yes.
Well,
we
but I
we
you
did
have
it once for a special event, and I think convinced him that it could be fun.
Well, and as you said, like you have to appeal to a broader audience.
Sure.
So and you have so many beers available. I mean, it's amazing when you go, just the line of taps. It's
Yeah,
vast. So it
yeah,
is nice that you have those other options.
for sure. Yes, it's fun. It's fun. The slushies will be back in the summer.
Yeah, so you get the hot cider in the wintertime and then you get the
Right.
slushies in
Yeah.
the summertime.
Yeah.
I didn't know that about Washington wines though, with being able to serve. So that's great.
I know it is interesting. It is a nice collaboration. For a long time, we've been able to offer cider. Um, it's just been a few years now, I think, on the wine.
Yeah. Well, and it's also great, like to have the food trucks there, like so you're supporting all these other local businesses, and I know that you're really involved in the larger community beverage community and supporting others. Um, as we wrap up the show, I want to talk about a few things that I've heard from you, and I want to give you an opportunity to promote an event that you have coming up next week.
Ooh,
Um, the risk that you took, that when you started the business and now as you're getting a little bit older, maybe assessing risk through a different lens because maybe having more to lose. And it's not just so much about you, but it's also about other people. And also, taking the time to really respect the dynamics that are going on and to recognize what's going on, with your partner and with Robyn as you run the business, to make sure that you're addressing some of those relationship needs to keep both your relationships happy and the business happy and successful. And also just talking about, support of community, your people, and doing something that you love. I mean, the thing that really just exudes from you is the joy in what you do. So that's a beautiful thing. So thank you. Thank you for creating great spaces. Thank you for creating amazing beverages. And on that note, give us some insight into the brewery warming party you have happening next week.
absolutely. I'm happy to. So hopefully your beer loving listeners know that we did open on Capitol Hill in August this past summer at the corner of Broadway and Union. But it was just recently that we brewed our first beer in that beautiful brewery. And so we are hosting a brewery warming party on Thursday, January 25th, in order to release that beer, which will be a hazy IPA, which is a fan favorite up there on Capitol Hill. So we're inviting the community to come in and celebrate with us. We'll be there at 5 p.m. it's an opportunity to meet us and get to know us a little more in a new neighborhood. We'll host brewery tours. We'll be offering $5 glasses of that hazy IPA, and we're just looking to have a fun celebration with the neighborhood and beyond. I mean, travel from Ballard. It is possible. I have learned in this venture that it is possible to leave Ballard. Not something I necessarily knew before before Capitol Hill.
Well, I will be venturing to Capitol Hill and also to your Kenmore location. And I love that you're doing all these other events too. Family-friendly events. That's the other thing that I want to make sure that I mention. So,
Yes.
yes.
Yes, we
So
are family friendly for sure. And friendly, dog on leash friendly. I mean, I think we might actually at this point have more dogs than children running around, but we love both.
yeah, there's at least a couple dogs every time I go to Ballard, that's for sure. So,
Yes.
Lara, thank you for a great conversation. It was such a pleasure to have you as a guest.
Well, it was really lovely to be here. I appreciate the opportunity to share our story.
Yes, thank you. And for all of you out there, support local business.
Yes,
That's
please.
something
Always.
that I want to make sure that I encourage everybody to do. So, and know the work and the effort and the courage that it takes to going into that.
See you in the tap rooms.
See you in the tap rooms soon. Thanks, everybody. Stay courageous.